Yes, it's What a Boast, a celebration of Reeves and Mortimer. Please welcome your hosts for this podcast, MJ Price and Paula Wiseman.
Hello and welcome to Quite a Boast, a podcast dedicated to the work and genius of Vic Reeves and Bob Mortimer. My name is Matt Price, founder of the Reeves and Mortimer Depository of Curious Stuff Facebook group.
And I am Paula Wiseman, curator and founder of the Divine Comedians podcast.
We are joined today by a man who has had a long and varied career in television, both behind and in front of the camera. He has worked with the great and the good of the comedy world, including Dave Gorman, Alan Davis, Dara O'Brien, Richard E. Grant and Billy Connolly, to name but a few. Also, back in the 90s, he worked and played alongside Jim and Bob on Shooting Stars and Families at War. Please enter the Novelty Island paddock, Iain Coyle.
Hey!
Hello there. Thank you very much. How are you? I'm all right, yeah. A long and illustrious career. Doesn't feel like that.
In a nutshell.
You certainly have variety, haven't you, Iain?
Yeah. But it's a joy to be able to talk about the gents. I'm obviously still an enormous fan, and I love the way they've both become, institutions in this country, and actually weirdly in their older age have reached a much more mainstream audience, which is joyful.
Yeah, I said it the other week. Back in the early 90s, I never envisioned a time when I would be watching Jim and Bob on one on a fishing show, one on a bird watching stroke painting show, which were the sort of programs you would turn off on a Sunday night when you were a young whippersnapper. Now they're must-see viewing.
There's still a twinkle though, isn't there? There's still an element of danger with them, and that's what's the joy of them. I think is you never quite know what's going to happen next. Even Gone Fishing, which is now, I don't know how many series it is. It's pretty laid down about what the rules are of that show. But Bob's always got a little twinkle in his eye, and he is. I don't know if you spent any time in their company, but they're just such great company, both of them. It's not surprising they come across, just doing a show, them just hanging out has become mainstream telly because they're great.
Yeah, it's all very. It all comes across as very natural, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So has comedy always been a thing for you, Iain? Have you always been interested in the comedy side of things?
Yeah, I mean, I'm 56 now. Pause for you to say, "Oh no, you don't look it." And I'm
we'll edit that in.
Yeah, we'll edit that.
I'm of the age, of the young ones and the start of Channel 4 and all that period of time. So Channel 4 felt like a channel that was made for me and my generation. So it felt really special. You felt as though you were in a special club. It felt like really exciting. And I think it probably wasn't it? It's something, people forget, it was a rejection of, it was a bit like punk rock. It was a rejection of what had gone before, and something new had happened. And it was really exciting and coincided with the launch of Channel 4. And I, in my little portable at home, little black and white portable in my room, used to exhaustively, consume it. I used to love. I loved that period of time, and I love, I watched the first night of Channel 4, which was I think it was Five Go something or other, wasn't it?
in Dorset, yeah.
Yeah, Five Go in Dorset. I absolutely adored that and loved all those people. And my first job in telly was working on Tonight with Jonathan Ross, and it was a show that I religiously watched. And I watched The Last Resort again, from its very, very first transmission. So, I mean, I was trying to work out how I actually ended up working in telly, and it was just almost by accident, because I was going to say university, it was Polytechnic. I went to Polytechnic in Sheffield. I did fine art in Polytechnic in Sheffield. And my girlfriend at the time, I didn't know what to do, because when I was coming to an end, and she was working in the film and media bit, I think, and I was doing painting. I mean, I haven't picked up a paintbrush since. And she decided that she wanted to work in telly, and I thought, well, that sounds a good enough thing to do.
Wow.
I'll work in telly. And one of our mates had moved down to London, and that felt like the thing to do. So I then spent 6 months on the dole, writing physical letters to try and get a job. And really, one of the only responses I got was from Channel X, who were doing, obviously, Jonathan's company. And I think we'd been away for the weekend, and we got back, and this is how old it was. There was a message on the answer machine to say I had an interview, and I think it might have been that afternoon or something. I think we'd been away for a weekend. We came back on the Monday, and I was like, oh my God, I was so excited. And then so I went into my interview, and I couldn't be more nervous, because obviously it was like a kid in a sweet shop. It was Channel X, it was Jonathan Ross's company. It was amazing, and it was really fortuitous, because Heather, who was the head of production, I think, at the time, was off ill. So I ended up being interviewed by Alan Mark, who was the MD of the company with Jonathan, and I think had never done an interview before in his life. And so we ended up just talking about football for an hour, and talking about comedy and football for an hour. And then somebody came in and said, Alan, you've got another meeting you went, oh, right, yeah, great, okay. Do you know it round here? If you're going to be, runner, do you know? I know, well, not really, but you'll pick it up. Just one last thing. If anybody asks you about this interview, don't say we just talked about football for now. So I left, and I thought, well, that seemed to go quite well. And I didn't hear anything for like 2 weeks. And I thought, oh, well, obviously I haven't got it. So I rang up to find out whether I'd got it or not. And they said, oh, yeah, you start in 2 weeks. I was like, oh, my God. Yeah. So then I went from being on the dole for 6 months to being a runner on Tonight with Jonathan Ross, which was the second iteration of Jonathan's chat shows, which was Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 6:30 live on Channel 4. I mean, can you imagine, like, from a lad from a working class background in the Northwest to be involved in that just was the most exciting thing in the world. And, there was, I'm just trying to remember some of the people that were on that show, and, and I had to look after and get to the stage and stand by, like, I remember James Brown was on it. I remember, ushering James Brown into the studio. This is bizarre. Yeah, it was amazing. And obviously Jim and Bob were, I think, milling around at that period of time. And Tonight with Jonathan Ross was actually the third iteration, wasn't it? Because 1 hour Jonathan Ross was the second iteration. That was when Not Down Ginger was on. And that's when Jim and Bob that's when they kind of did their first stuff with, no, I think Jim was on The Last Resort.
Yeah, did a couple of episodes of The Last Resort.
Hammering fruits and vegetables or something with nails, if I remember correctly. So they were in and around, and I think a Big Night Out. I think they're probably still doing Big Night Out at the time, or just coming to an end to it. And again, I was so starstruck when they were in and around the offices. It was just amazing. I go back at it now. I think how lucky I was, But I wrote hundreds of letters, and that's all I got back. So I was just really, really lucky. And then I sort of stuck around there for ages, for years, and was a runner and then head runner, and then I ran on Saturday Zoo. So that's how and again, that felt like the most exciting thing. With Coogan and John Thompson, and it was just the most, it was every amazing comedian you could imagine was on it. And then there was, superstars, American superstars come over and do it. I remember Kylie being on it. I remember just being so like amazed. I actually saw Kylie in the flesh. It was amazing. And so I became a sort of trusted runner, and that sort of gave me, I suppose it gave me confidence to be around there, and they sort of needed me to be in the office because nobody else knew how everything ran. And they used to have a tape library, which I used to run the tape library, and nobody knew really how that worked. And I did duplicates of tapes and stuff, and so they kind of couldn't get rid of me because they needed me there.
Yeah.
So yeah, and then I got a job working on the radio show with Mark Lamarr as a researcher. Then sort of went on from there really. But I ended up working with Jonathan's brother Simon Ross, and went and worked for his company for, I don't know for how long, a couple of years or something. And then I got a call from Alan and asked me if I wanted to work on Shooting Stars. And I think that was the second series of Shooting Stars. So I don't know what had happened in the first series, but obviously I jumped at the chance to be a researcher on that show. And it was, again, just so exciting. It was, I think by second series, it had already established itself as a massive hit. And to be part of that, to be part of something with Jim and Bob just felt I think everybody felt the excitement, to be honest with you. You could feel it, and it just felt so different. And I got to, I was sort of, they were really generous to me. I mean, everybody at Channel X was very generous to me, and then Jim and Bob were just they allowed me to. So I basically started out writing very straight questions for them, because at the time, when it first started, it was almost a straight quiz, and then they put in a bit of surreal stuff added around the edges. But then, obviously, as it went later on, it became almost completely surreal. Yeah. So I started out writing really straight questions, and then I tried to put in. Nobody asked me. I just started trying to put funny ones in, and some of them got in, and I was just so excited. It gave me incredible confidence. But Jim and Bob, I've got a theory about Jim and Bob, which is what we laugh at and what we find funny. It's Bob's translation of Jim's madness, because Bob is obviously he's a genius in his own right, but I think Bob finds Jim funnier than anybody else, and we laugh at Bob laughing at Jim, and that's why it's so infectious, I think. Yeah. But yeah, anyway, I'll be ranting on. Ask me some more questions.
So, were you familiar with Vic and Bob from the get-go? Were you a fan of Big Night Out from the very start?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like everybody else, when Big Night Out came on, I just thought, obviously, I had no idea what was going on, but I knew it was bizarre and surreal, and I was a fan of Spike Milligan as well, and the Q series and stuff, which had elements of that. And so yeah, I used to avidly record it on my VHS recorder, and at the time, BBC Two and Channel 4 were vying for that for the comedy strands. Was it the Wednesday or Thursday? I don't know, but it was and Channel 4 were playing Cheers and Frasier and all that, and to basically as a lead-in, I guess, to the newer stuff. I just felt really exciting. But yeah, absolutely, I was a massive fan, and they were really cool as well. You forget that they were sort of heartthrobs to a degree as well. You look at there's a couple of the records that Jim did, and he's like a proper pop star.
matinee idol.
Yeah, absolutely, which is ridiculous.
Yeah, I think we all had the posters on our walls.
Yeah,
pictures of them on their mopeds, and
Yeah. So you mentioned you're a researcher on Shooting Stars. Aside from writing questions, what would that entail on a day-to-day basis?
Well, I would get clips. So I went into, back then it was nothing was computerized, so you had to have a relationship with people on the phone to try and get clips and stuff, and then literally describe clips to you on the phone. And I ended up having quite a good relationship with the people in the BBC Clips library, even to the extent I actually went out there. God knows where it was. It was somewhere way, way out in the sticks. So I went out there, and it was all index cards and stuff. So you'd go through the index cards, and you'd order some stuff up, and then they'd send you VHS copies of the things that you wanted, and then it was pot luck as to whether you found anything decent. And then and I'd collate all the questions, straight ones and bizarre ones, and then also I'd do the scores. So George Dawes did the scores, but he didn't do the scores. I did the scores.
Just minus the romper suit.
Yeah, and so like sometimes you'd go for the first part of the show, and nobody would get anything right. So you'd have to sort of think, well, I can't do. I did 0-0 one time, and
how's this going to work?
What do you mean? It can't be 0-0. It can't be. So I had to create a score which could have. I mean, no one cared anyway. It didn't matter. But yeah, so I had to collate. I had to put all the cards together and do all the clips, which doesn't sound very much really, but it felt really. I was really stressed about it at the time, and then you'd sort of get a job, odds and sods, in the edit as well. I'd get quite excited about being in the edit and help prepare notes for the edit, and being in the edit felt, like magical as well. And back then it was much more complicated to do an edit, because actually you couldn't go backwards, because it was almost like reel to reel editing. So you couldn't, if you had made a mistake, you'd have to start from the very start. So there'd have to be copious notes, and the directors, David G. Croft and Mark Lamarr would take copious notes into the edit. Yeah, it's mad to think Mark Lamarr was the director of Stars now, isn't it?
It sounds like it's a proper learning experience, just learning on the job as you go, learning.
Yeah, I think we all did. I mean, it was television then. I just was looking back at it. Television then, it was such a small world, and I didn't really realize at the time. It felt that, there was a lot of money around, and I didn't realize. If you look at telly now, comparison to then, it was just the onset of independent production companies. So there was a bit more money swirling around than had ever been before. And also, it was a really small world. There was Channel X, there was Planet 24, and there was Talkback. Really, the key players in that, and Hat Trick were the key players in that world. And the Channel, Seamus Cassidy at the time, I think, was the commissioner at Channel 4. I can't remember who was commissioning it. BBC at the time, but it was pretty much the same companies that did all the shows, and all the shows I wanted to work on. At some stage I worked for all of those companies, because they did all the shows that I wanted to work on, and working on Shooting Stars was such a leg up. I cannot tell you, because television then, and probably still is, it wasn't really a professional industry. There wasn't really any. Certainly, as a producer or a researcher or an AP, there was no training as such. You just learned on the job. So, and then if you were associated with a successful show, then other people would come knocking on your door. So, just doing a little bit odds and sods on Shooting Stars opened so many doors for me, and also gave me so much more confidence. So from that, I got loads of stuff, loads of writing work, loads of and then bizarrely ended up doing a bit of presenting on stuff.
Well, that's the first time I'm aware of you is presenting Funny Business, which was late night ITV.
Which again, that was there was no money in that, I tell you that. That was again a bizarre thing because I was knocking about the office, and there was no money. They got me to do a little strand reviewing video releases. I started out doing that for half a series, or whatever, and then Jojo Smith, who was presenting it for a while, she ended up not available or not doing it, or ITV didn't want her to do it or something. I don't know. I can't remember. Lovely woman, brilliant comic. And so they needed somebody else to host it. I was knocking about the office. I was cheap. And they said they got another series away by saying to them, we would have guest hosts. And then they very quickly realized that was impractical. So they said, you do the first one and let's see if they notice. And then, so I did the first one. They didn't notice, and I just carried on. I did about, 50 or 60 episodes of that. And then again, was able through that to meet loads and loads of comics and get, friendships with comics. And, I'm friends with lots of comics today from that period. But I remember interviewing Jim and Bob on that as well. And
on the set of their A-Team sketch, I believe.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But I was working on that shoot for Shooting Stars.
Right. And
obviously that's how I got access and managed to that I don't know what series that was, but that was an amazing, that was they got a bit of money to really up the quality of the VTs that they were making. I remember that one. That was brilliant. And then the other one I really remember was the one they did about Brookside, where Bob played. Do you remember the pizza shop on Brookside?
Yeah.
Bob played Mick in the pizza thing, and he really looked like him. It was amazing. So, oh God, I'm just trying to think of what other things from Jim and Bob I remember. I remember being in the office when they were doing Smell Off. I think I may have been still running then, and then they kept sending through I remember somebody else talking about their elaborate drawings and stuff for Smell Off. Well, they used to fax those through to the director, but they couldn't get their head around the fact that they couldn't do it on lined paper because obviously the fax couldn't really handle it, and it was a really busy production company. They were doing loads of stuff, but the fax was constantly busy with Jim's drawings because he was doing them on lined paper, and he basically he knackered loads of and then people go, well, who's sending this through? So like they try and fax it through, and then I remember having to pick up the fax phone and ring them from the fax phone and say, can you stop sending these through? Can you have to do them on online? And obviously they didn't know what
please get plain paper.
But that they were but again, I still remember just being in awe of them. I just thought at the time that all those people, that Jonathan Ross and Jim and Bob, and I can't remember who else was in the office then, I just thought they were magical. They had a magical thing that I just couldn't. That was just completely out of reach. Somebody coming from background I came from, just felt like I just couldn't believe my luck. But then I suppose you realise that when you're around people, especially in production, that actually it isn't magic. You just got to have a bit of confidence, and he who shouts with confidence gets more work. And so I sort of got imbued, and I think Jim and Bob were part of the reason I did feel confident and went on to do more stuff like behind and in front of the camera, because I just thought, well, if they trust me to do it, then I must be all right, you know.
Did you say about being in front of the camera? I'm trying to think. Did you get on screen in any small parts on Shooting Stars? I know you did in Families of War, which we'll get to.
I don't know, to be honest with you. I don't think so. I can't remember doing anything.
You'd have people like Rhys Thomas and later Tony Wade turning up to in the end sketch, in the end game and things like that.
Reeves was I think Reeves was a runner towards the end of it, or certainly Reeves was a runner on. I think he was he a runner on Families at War as well? I don't remember. I remember Reeves turning up and then I'd also come across Reeves when I was working with Jonathan's brother Simon Ross, because Reeves and the boys had a sketch team called Nothing for a while before they went on. Well, it was literally called Nothing, and they wrote a whole load of sketches. And Simon and his production company tried to get them away a few times, and so I sort of was vaguely familiar with them from that. I think it was that way round. But yeah, God, look at all those boys now. They're all stratospheric, aren't they? Yeah, so I don't know how I ended up working on Families at War. Again, must have been just knocking about the office. It sounds all accidental, but I think the BBC had how on earth anybody thought Jim and Bob were right for prime time Saturday night. I have no idea. And but Bob was, I think Bob was obsessed with the idea because he'd seen maybe Who Wants to Be a Millionaire and seen the fact that that's how you made proper money. At the time, he was a bit obsessed with money. How you make proper money is with a format. We need to come up with formats. So the BBC had given them some money and told them that they wanted more stuff from them. I don't know whose idea it was to put them on primetime telly. So I think I was sort of tasked with coming up with help in coming up with a format. And I remember doing the drawing, the Cubiscus, which was the end game, if you remember. And so I thought about, if there's a family, then they would all have to work together and to do something. So I came up with this contraption, which had a claw on it, which I think I called I can't remember what I called it. I've still got the drawing somewhere. What did he used to call it? It was Morrissey the Consumerist Monkey, wasn't it? So I called it the Mighty Claw of Consumerism. That's what I called it. And they completely ignored that. And then I remember Bob coming over, looking at the drawing and drawing on the claw a person. So that, literally how it happened. So, and then that obviously became, I still stand by that end game. It's a really good game. And yeah, we built the big square. It's so bizarre.
Well, I've watched a few episodes recently, and I bet Bob regrets drawing that person on it. Either him or Jim, who were playing the spider each week, seemed to be in absolute agony by the end.
Well, to be honest with you, they did try and make it look more difficult than it was. But when they built it, I remember it being on the screen, brought through on the studio floor, and if you remember, you had to put it through a little trap door at the top. Anything you won, you had to put it through a little trap door that then came down a slide to say what you'd won. And I don't know why this is important, but I do remember it. The trap door, when they did it, pushed out, and I went, no, it should pull in because it makes it then more difficult to put it. Which did, it made it so much more difficult to get all the stuff in. And it was. But I am the spider on the water bug, and where did that come from? Yeah, it's not something you can predict, is it? No. I remember doing the pilot of that show, and in the pilot we did VTs in people's houses, and I think the family eventually the family we went to, one of the families we went to, appeared on the show. It was a kid from Middlesbrough who was a ballet dancer or something. So we ended up going to Middlesbrough. I think it was Middlesbrough, Sunderland, and we went up there on the train and messed about in their house and stuff. But I do remember being on that train there and back. And I've never laughed so much in my whole life as being sitting on the train for, I don't know how many hours it was, sat with them. And they just relentlessly took the mickey out of me. And that just then became what they did. They were just like comedically cruel to me all the time. Because I could take it and I laughed it off, it almost encouraged them. So when we then did the series, we used to do a rehearsal in this church hall in Notting Hill or somewhere around the West London, and then I was tasked because I was, I'd been given a bit more. I'd done a bit of work and I worked on different shows and stuff. I was quite cocky by then. So I was then given the task of writing up questions for the families and doing their intros and stuff and writing some stuff, and then they go, right, so they do a bit of rehearsal and fun. They go, all right, it's time for Coyle to do his jokes. Everybody, come on, all gather around. Everybody, come on. Coyle's going to tell us some really funny jokes now, aren't you, Coyle? So basically, I think they read them out completely deadpan. And like it was like the game was to not laugh at anything and
just needed the tumbleweed.
Yeah. But some of the stuff did make it on the show, so I was delighted. Yeah, but God, it doesn't feel that long ago, really. I don't know how long ago it was now. I mean, I did get together to have a look at the dates and stuff. So that I worked on series 2 of Shooting Stars, which was 1996. Oh God, that just doesn't feel that long.
Is that like 30 years ago?
Yeah. But
crazy.
Yeah, and it was, and I was trying to find some dates, and I got on my computer. I had an old CV which I was trying to work back through, and so where are we? So I'd done a bit of presenting before I ended up doing Families at War. So Families at War was 1998. So by then I'd done 2 bits of presenting, and I'd done a bit of APing and writing on other shows and stuff. So, I felt again imbued with that confidence and stuff from doing that stuff. So, they are. Don't tell them, but they are quite responsible career, really. Yeah. But,
were you in the studio on the day of the Leo Sayer appearance?
Oh my God, it was so incredible. Oh God, it was so incredible.
He's having a flashback.
Oh, so incredible. But we all knew that was incredible. Oh my God, that's incredible. And I think we made them play it back in the studio and then play it back in slow motion in the studio. So we watched it about half a dozen times in the studio as they did it. Oh God, it was incredible. It's so incredible. Yeah, and first of all, I really thought everybody was. It's that moment where you don't know whether to laugh or not to see whether he was all right or not. But he was all right. Yeah. But if you look back at it now, he just really completely fly through it. I mean, I don't know health and safety who passed that, but the risk assessment must have gone out the window.
We can see Jim's face as he just goes straight away. And you can see genuine laughter, but there's also that look in his eyes. This is gold.
Yeah,
this is staying in.
God, it was incredible. Forgot about that. Yeah, and then I think I did do on screen some stuff.
I can remember you dressed as Henry VIII.
Was I dressed as Henry VIII? I don't really remember that. What were they doing? Yeah.
I think you're just literally standing there.
Just standing there. Right, fine. I must have put some weight on by then. And I remember somebody dropping basketballs on my head or something. I was a naughty schoolboy
Yeah.
called Don something or other. Bob just came up with a name, and the game was this talented kid, or no, it might have been a woman actually. She was good at netball. That was it. She was good at netball. So she then had I don't know how many nets to score in a period of time, and Dom Parfit, was that what I was
That
called?
sounds about right.
I remember that. Wow. And yeah, I was a naughty boy, and Bob was just shouting, "You naughty boy. How do you like that, Don Parfit? You naughty boy." And I just had to sort of look uncomfortable. Which, when basketballs are falling on your head, it was quite uncomfortable. And I don't know how that happened. I think maybe I'd suggested that or that basketball thing. And then, you could drop on somebody's head and they went, "Oh, they are. Sure, go and get dressed up as a schoolboy then." Okay, fine. Yeah, fair enough. It was somebody. Well, what do you do? Like someone ended up doing speed ironing because that's all she could think was an auntie or something, or that all they could say was that she was good at ironing, so they did speed ironing, and I think the ironing board started walking around or something.
Yeah.
And then there was the powerlifter. Do you remember the powerlifter who? Oh no, that was Leo Sayer, wasn't it? He was a powerlifter. That's how we ended up on having Leo Sayer on his back. Again, who thinks of that? Who thinks of putting Leo Sayer on his back? Oh, it was amazing. I'll have to watch some of those. Presumably, there's some of them knocking about on YouTube.
Yeah, there is.
But I don't think anybody was surprised it didn't get another series. It is so bizarre. But I couldn't believe how successful Shooting Stars became. And when that first run, because I did the second series, and then I think I just carried on until it finished that first batch, I think. And then by then it was getting, I don't know, 9-10 million. I mean, it's getting a lot, but it got progressively more surreal as it went on. But it did really, at its peak was doing amazingly well. And obviously they did the tour with the Fast Show, which was, I mean, the Hammersmith shows, and I don't know how many they did them, but they were all sold out. That was incredible. It was incredible how popular it was. I was a guest on the live show, bizarrely, the tour, yeah, because Lisa Thomas, who's now a very successful agent, was the it seems bizarre to say now, but she was the receptionist, and then she gradually worked her way up to booking guests. In fact, the bizarre thing about Lisa is that she worked in an Italian restaurant around the corner from the offices, and I think Jonathan and the producer of his chat show at the time just really liked her. So the job this is how weirdly
what a way to get a job.
Unprofessional it was, and now she's like one of the top agents, comedy agents in the country. It's bizarre, isn't it? But she was tasked to book all these shows at Hammersmith, and it was quite a difficult thing. I don't know. I think everybody was being paid a flat rate, and it wasn't a lot of money. So it ended up with the bizarre people. And at the time, I must have just been doing funny business at the time. So yeah, I ended up on stage with them, which was absolutely terrifying. But it was such a massive. It's a massive venue, and it was completely sold out. Bizarre.
Yeah, I know everyone has such fond memories of those dates at the Apollo.
Yeah, it was just. I mean, it was just like all that period of time. It just felt like a massive party, And Tony was going on about it. It was free booze. It was free booze. it was the idea that you could get free booze. It still wasn't a novelty to me. It was like amazing.
Was it the Labatt's Apollo at the time?
Probably was. I mean, I don't know, but I've been there since many times, and it's such a beautiful place. It's a fantastic, and then weirdly ended up working opposite there when I ended up working at Dave, and so yeah, all that area seems to be quite important to my career. But yeah, so latterly, the last few years, I ended up getting a job as a commission editor at Dave at UK TV. So I was basically ordering and execing panel shows and comedy stuff like that. I then had the opportunity to get Jim and Bob and all those people on various shows, and that was joyful to see them again, to have them on my shows and stuff. It was brilliant.
According to the good people at IMDb, if this is correct, Bob was on my favourite sketch in 2018.
Yes, but so my favourite sketch was basically, it's basically whoever you basically came on and gave you top 10 sketches or something or other. You talk about sketches, you see the sketches, and then they'd recreate a sketch at the end, which was your favourite sketch. So Bob was on it. I can't remember what sketch he recreated, but he was I think he was the first guest, or maybe Whitehouse was the first guest on it. But it was fantastic. He was also on. We did a show with Ross Noble called Freewheeling, and Bob was on that. And Freewheeling, the premise of the show was, you want me to do it now because Twitter's changed massively. Because Twitter was quite new then, and Ross just basically made up a whole show from people's suggestions on Twitter, and then the episode with Bob in culminated in making custard in a cafe somewhere, and
yes,
then Bob and Ross ended up making custard chinos and giving them out to people, and then filling up industrial water pistols and firing custard at people in the street.
Yeah. That's on YouTube. I've seen that.
Yes, yeah. It's fantastic. That was a fantastic show. Ross and Bob were great together. Again, you see the joy of Bob enjoying Ross's surreal nature of Ross's humor. So yeah, and then I think I'm pretty sure every panel show I've ever done, I've always had Bob, or certainly tried to get Bob on.
I think they've both been on Alan Davis.
That's the thing is with Bob, you never know when he tells a story. You never know whether he's telling the truth or he's making it. That's why he's so good as on Would I Lie to You? Because he told a story on Alan Davis about him having a particularly high arse. And it's something that's a story that's come round. A couple had said it told that story a couple of times, and about the fact that he sits on the toilet backwards.
Yes.
And I think the first time he told it was on Alan Davis as Untitled, and he hadn't quite thought it through the fact they'd have to take his trousers completely off or something.
Yeah.
So they kind of hoisted. It was hoisted by his own petard. They sort of said, "No, you can't do that." And he was like, "Oh." So, but I think that I don't know whether he's told that story on Would I Lie to You as well, but I've certainly heard that story more than once now.
Yes, same here. I've heard him tell it to Richard Ayoade.
Yeah,
it's the only time you see Richard Ayoade crack up, which is rare to see on TV. But there was a young comedy actor who was on As Untitled and obviously didn't know how to take Bob at all. I won't mention his name, but he's just like sort of not dismissive, but he's just not buying into it. He's just like staring at him saying, what are you talking about, mate? Rather than just going with it like everybody else.
That's why he's so brilliant. That's why he's so brilliant on Would I Lie to You, because you can't. I mean, even when he says that's the truth, I'm not sure. I mean, I know there's some elements of truth in even in his lies, even in the story about cracking an egg in the bath. There is an element of truth in that, but not the egg story. But I remember him telling me the story of him going round to what's the name of the pop star? I can't remember. Chris Rea's house, and him talking about him having a collection of doilies, and Bob taking a piss out of the doilies, and Chris Rea being very defensive about the fact he had doilies or something or other. The fact that there was loads of dog shit in the path outside, and so there are some elements of truth in that story, but
I don't think Bob knows what's true and
no,
what's embellishment.
I don't think he does either. That, I mean, that's, his books are a bit like that, aren't you? You don't quite know whether they're true or not. But yeah, he's and it's a joy to see, because Lee Mack's still a good mate of mine, and to watch Lee enjoy Bob telling those stories. You can see the joy on Lee's face when he tries to get him on his team every time, because he just loves the way Bob is on that show. It's fantastic, and I love the fact that he's not on there all the time. He's just kept as a little treat a couple of times a series. It's fantastic.
So, moving away from Jim and Bob to the rest of your career, I know it's been wide and varied, but what have you been doing since then?
Well, I said I was at Dave for 10 years pretty much. So I did all majority of the original shows. Worked with some amazing people. Worked on Meet the Richardsons or commissioned Meet the Richardsons, and stuff with Ross, and loads of stuff for Gold, as you said, the Billy Connolly stuff with Gold. I mean, I've probably got a list of all the people I've worked with, and I just feel so honoured to have worked with some of those people, and like David Jason. We did a series of David Jason, which is, again, so surreal. Sat with David Jason trying to explain what I wanted from him, and it's been fantastic. It's been a fantastic. That job was a joy, and then so I packed that in about 2 years ago. Decided to go back freelance again, and I thought, what's the worst that could happen? It's not like the industry is going to collapse, is it? Oh yes, it has collapsed. So I've sort of survived in doing a bit of consulting, a bit of writing, and a bit of podcast production and stuff. But it's and then I'm trying to putting together a thing with a friend of mine, hopefully going to launch in the new year. But it's bizarre. I've done lots of weird stuff, and desperate to do more weird stuff, but the opportunity to do weird stuff just seems to be less and less, because
the industry's changed so much, obviously, with streaming services and there's less terrestrial telly. But you think with all those different options, there'd be more chance to do weird and wonderful stuff, but it doesn't seem to be the case.
The problem with that, though, is that there are more and more people but they're all fighting over the same amount of money, and they're fighting over the same purse. So everybody becomes risk adverse. The less, the thinner the slices of the TV ham has to be sliced. I don't know why I've gone down ham.
The TV ham
has to be sliced. The less likely are people to take chances and stuff. The stuff that Jim and Bob did was of its time. I can't imagine people would be able to do that again. I mean, certainly not at the moment. Or certainly needs to be a massive move away. I mean, we're still in the middle of the convergence of TV and online, and it's still, sadly, we've sort of sold a lot of that stuff to the Americans. What we've given them, which will make it even more difficult, I think, for us for newer, more weird stuff to happen. But love will find a way. I think that's what they say.
Well, I guess the equivalent of a Vic and Bob starting today would put their stuff out online.
Yeah,
and
that's
themselves.
the good thing, though, isn't it? That's the amazing thing about that, is that actually, when I first started, the idea that you could shoot, edit, and upload, broadcast your own stuff, it was beyond comprehension. But now you can do that. Even on an iPhone, you can,
do everything, can't you? You can film, you can edit, you can do everything.
pretty much broadcast quality on an iPhone now. So, kids who want to do their own punk rock, they can in rock or in comedy can do that. And there's still opportunities to do live stuff. I think I worked at Hattrick for a long time and worked with Jimmy Mulville, who is another of my TV dads, and he just says, your audience, if it's good enough, that your audience will find it.
Yeah.
So that's people will always need content. So no matter where your content gets made, it'll find its own audience. You've got to believe that, or you're gonna have to give up. I'm not ready to give up yet. It may well be giving up on me, but I'm not giving up on it. But Jim and Bob, I don't think they've been more popular. I think they are,
yeah, definitely
national institutions, aren't they?
It's amazing. I think it's obviously because the fishing show Would I Lie to You has put Bob into the mainstream.
Yeah,
there's a whole lot of people who know him from that.
Yeah,
they may know the name Vic and Bob, but they probably wouldn't have watched those shows.
Yeah, I mean, if you compare that to some of the weirdest stuff on Smell Of, it's light years away, isn't it? But there's still, as I say, there's still a glimmer of surreal naughtiness in him, and
well, he usually ends up falling on his arse, whatever whatever mainstream.
Didn't he say recently that he doesn't see himself as a comedian?
Well, yeah. I mean, he doesn't tell jokes, really, does he? I mean,
I suppose it's a different kind of.
Yeah, I mean, he does tell jokes, really. He has told jokes, but he is. I think he's a storyteller, and a lot of brilliant storytelling. And his storytelling isn't necessarily real. He makes stories up. I mean, I've the Atletico Mints podcast is just, I mean, so inventive, and incredible. how that world is created every single episode. It's incredible, and that I think that's off the top of his head. And it's how does he do that? I mean, it's incredible gift.
I think if he wanted to, I don't think he does, because he likes to stay there and watch telly. But if he wanted to go out as a one-man show, he would fill arenas across the country at the minute, just telling stories.
I think he'd probably be reluctant to do that because it might involve some preparation. Although saying that, to have the discipline to sit down and write a book, I would never have thought Bob would have the discipline to do that. So that's come in later life, I think.
That was one good thing that came out of lockdown.
Yes, I suppose so. Yeah, and then of course Jim's artwork. I mean, I've got a couple of Jim's in my originals. In my I was listening to Tony Way talking to you, saying he got his given to him. I didn't get any given to me. I had to buy them. But I've got a couple of Jim's things. I went to one of his a couple of his his opening nights and stuff. And he's such a gifted man, and you can tell a Jim original from a mile off. I go to the summer exhibition every year, and I wandered about, and I saw something. I thought that's one of Jim's. I can tell it, and I'd looked it up in the thing, and I was right, absolutely. He's got a very particular style. But I mean, the wildlife stuff he does is unbelievably accurate and beautiful. So, and he's again another national treasure. Yeah. So I've been very lucky to work with both of them, really. Yeah. And would love to work with them again. I just wish somebody had put together another, not Shooting Stars, but another iteration of that style of thing with them, because the joy of having other celebs in the mix was so fantastic, and it felt. And look at the look of. I mean, the celebs who came on Shooting Stars, they were terrified a lot of them.
Bemused.
They didn't know what they were going to do to them. And a lot of them had no idea what was going on at all, and because they hadn't watched the show, and it was such a joy, and
Any memorable guests there, Iain?
Oh, I mean, Belinda Carlisle. I remember Belinda Carlisle just going, "What on earth?" She had no idea. Jim started rubbing his legs, and she just like, I just had no concept of what was going on. I mean, a lot of those episodes now, they're probably a lot of those people have been cancelled now, have they? I don't know.
There's a few, yeah.
I can't think. I need to. I know Dave Lee Travis was one of them, wasn't he? Harry Cornflake was on.
Harry Cornflake, yeah.
Although I don't think he was ever charged with anything, was he? But I can't think, to be honest with you. Was Robbie Williams on there? Remember Robbie Williams?
Yeah, did a couple of it.
And I remember Stephen Fry being on it. Stephen Fry on it because he's unwieldy large. He's an enormous man, Stephen Fry. And we all had drinks afterwards. And then we ended up in some hotel near Shepherd's Bush or something. Like the whole crew pretty much. And I remember Stephen Fry being very drunk and just being enormous and slightly terrifying. But he was, and I haven't spoken about Mark Lamarr. Mark Lamarr was amazing. And Mark could get a fight in an empty room. He would just, at the time, he just had so much aggression about him. But actually underneath it was a really lovely bloke. But he would just end up. I remember going into some members club with him, and then a fight started immediately as we walked in. And he went, "Look, I haven't said anything to anybody. I've just walked in, and it's kicked off again." And where's Mark gone? What a waste! He was such a talent, Mark. I mean, his stand-up was so incredible. He was great fun to be around, as was Matt. You know, again, another national treasure. How Matt's ended up being Matt and Dave had ended up being mainstream as well. I interviewed them on Funny Business, Matt and Dave, and I just remember thinking, what on earth have I stumbled into? It was before Shooting Stars. And I thought, what on earth's going on?
This Bernard Chumley era.
Bernard Chumley was, I mean, again, it was terrifying.
I've just seen him in he's in the new Gladiator 2 movie.
Amazing. Amazing.
You know.
Where did it all go wrong?
It's so surreal.
Yeah. They're brilliant though. They're all those people, and Tony is doing incredible stuff, and all the young lads are involved. Reese has again gone stellar. It's incredible. But again, all of them really imbued with confidence from working on those shows. And like I said, where did it all go wrong for me? But I would say that they, from my perspective, they're unique, and where they came from, I don't know how that could ever happen again. The fact that Jim just was doing weird, surreal art performances, and then to an audience of 3-4 people, one of whom was Bob, and then Bob joined in, and then within weeks, I think they ended up being Jonathan Ross going down there, and then look where we are now. It seems insane, doesn't it? But there was at the time such a thirst for new things. They probably weren't ready to be on telly. That's why it was so good. Yeah. That's why Big Night Out was so incredible. But absolute joy.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Today.
Thank you very much.
Iain.
What a boast.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you all for listening to this edition of Quite a Boast. Special thanks to Matt Lucas for permission to use the Peanuts music as our theme tune, and thanks to Ed Lewis for this edit. Thank you to Jake Chesham for permission to use the photo from his 1995 shoot of Jim and Bob in our various online locations for the podcast. And of course, thank you very much to Jim Moyer and Bob Mortimer, without whom this podcast, well, it just wouldn't exist, would it? Remember to check out Paula's Divine Comedians podcast as well, and to join the Reeves Mortimer Depository of Curious Stuff Facebook group. And I think you'll agree that really was a lot of fun. Goodbye.